Hi everyone, welcome. Happy New Year. In this video, we're going to build our profile update view or page. So what you're going to first of all do is to first of all associate this user with a profile picture. If you watched the previous video, we actually had coded the URL and added it to our user in the admin. So for each user we have a profile that's created automatically when the user signs up. All that was covered in the previous video. So now what you're going to first of all do is to associate each of our user profiles with a unique avatar. And that's where Gravatar comes in. So Gravatar is a free service that allows us to create unique identifiers of images that are associated with users. And these can be avatars for everywhere they create their accounts. So what happens is whenever you create an email address, you associate that email address with a certain image. And what Gravatar does is to get that image and then use it across all accounts that may need that specific image. And in case you do not have an image associated to one email address, what Gravatar does is to give you the ability to provide a default image address that you can use for that user, just like we're going to see. So Gravatar can be used for various programming languages, but we're going to be using libgravatar, which is a set of tools that allow us to interact with the Gravatar APIs using Python. So let's head over to the libgravatar website. So it's just a library that provides Python 3 interface for the Gravatar APIs. So the first thing we're going to do is to first of all go ahead and install libgravatar. So I'm going to go within our Visual Studio Code, and what I'm going to do is to say pip install libgravatar. And once that is installed, now we are going to go, I actually have it already installed, so I'm going to go right within my accounts app. I'll create a new file, and I'm going to call this file utils.py. Once we have our utils.py, we are now going to go ahead and create a function that's going to help us to generate a unique Gravatar URL that's going to be for that specific image associated with the user's email address with which they signed up. So for us to do that, I'm first of all going to close my terminal. So we're going to begin by first of all importing our Gravatar class, just like you see right here on the documentation. We need to access the Gravatar class, and then we'll be able to pass in a URL in the specific object, or actually our email address. So given our email address, we shall return an image that is specific to Gravatar or specific to that email address. So to do that, I'm going to first of all go at the top of our code and import our Gravatar class. So to do that, we shall say from libgravatar, we're going to import our Gravatar class. So now I'm going to create our function, and I'll call this create avatar. So within create avatar, we are going to have an email address as the only parameter that we shall need. And once given that email address, we're now going to go ahead and first of all create our Gravatar object. So that's going to be Gravatar, and that is going to take in our email address. And once we provide our email address, now we're going to access various methods, but the most important one is the one for getting our image. So we're going to do that by saying return, and then in this case I'll say g.getImage. So this getImage method has a lot of arguments, but the most important one we need right now is going to be the size, of which they also provide for us a default size of the image that we need. Now we also need a default image, which is going to be the image that will be placed in case the email address we want to provide is not associated with any image. So we shall choose a random image on the internet and then use that as our default profile image. So for us to be able to do that, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and first of all provide our default. So when you provide our default, I'm going to go to our web browser right here. I randomly selected an image from the internet to speed things up. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy its address, and then I'll create a string, and inside that string I'll just paste in that specific image that we want to use as our email address. So once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to see how we can create our image for the current logged in user who is our admin user. So what I'm going to do is to first of all close this, and I'm going to pull up my terminal. And the first thing I'm going to do is to first of all open our money.py shell or our Django shell. So just come here and say python money.py shell. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and first of all import our create avatar function that we've created within our utils.py. So to do that, I'll say from our accounts app, we are going to import our utils, and from there we shall go ahead and import our create avatar. So once we've created our avatar, now the next thing we're going to do is to also first of all access the user for whom we want to create an avatar. So to do that, I'm first of all going to import our get user model function. So I'll say from Django dot contrib, it's going to be .contrib.auth. We are going to import our get user model function. And once we have that, then we are going to now also get access to our user model by calling it. So we're going to say use get user model. And once we have this, then we are going to access our user who is our admin user. So this user is going to be equal to the result of us querying our database. So we shall query by saying user.objects.get, and then we shall get that user who has the ID of 1. So once we have this user, now this user is actually going to be our admin user, and their profile will also be accessed via user.profile. So once we have that, then we can now go ahead and update this user's email. So let's go ahead and do that. So since we have this user, we can also go ahead and access their email address via user.email. So let's go ahead and create for them an avatar. So the way we're going to do that is by saying create avatar. Sorry for this. So this will be create avatar. And then we shall provide user.email. So what this will do is to create for us this specific link that we see over here. So let's try to visit this link. When we click and open this link in our browser, we shall be led to the Gravatar image associated with our email address. Now this is my image, which I used to open my account that I used to create our admin user. So what I'm going to do is to first of all go ahead and update our user's image. So I'll go to our profiles. I'm on my admin, and I'll head over to the profile for our admin. And what I'll do is to go ahead and change what we have as our current address or our current profile image to what we have in here. So I'll just come and save, and that will go ahead and save our profile image. So if we go back right here, when you try to refresh, we shall now see that our profile image is what is returned as our user's profile image. So that makes our entire process of profile images really fast and really easy. So once we've done that, now the next thing we're going to do is to basically go ahead and associate each user with a profile image when they are created. So remember, each user account that we have within our application creates a profile by use of signals, just like we did in the previous videos. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and basically update our signals so that we associate each of our users with a profile image based on their email address. So to do that, I'm going to go back within our code. So I'll remove this, and when you go to our accounts, we have our signals module right here where we wrote our signals. So the most important signal that we need is going to be our receiver right here, which is our create profile function. And in here, what we did is to just go ahead and create our profile object. So when you check our profile model, what we're going to have is the profile image, but this profile image is going to be none since we do not associate each profile with a profile image. So what we may want to do is to head over within our signals, and then first of all import our create avatar function. So I'll just come right here and say from dot utils, we are going to go ahead and import our create avatar function, or create avatar method, or create avatar function actually. And once we've imported our create avatar function, I'll just come here and create our profile by providing our profile image. So I'll say profile image, and this is going to be equal to create avatar. And now we need to access an email address for the current user we want to create a profile for. And that user is going to be our instance. So we're going to access our user through our instance. And when we want to access the email address of that user, we're going to call that via instance.email. So shall go ahead and save. And once we have this, then let's go ahead and try to create a user account. So to create a user account, I'm going to head over to our page right here, and I'll try to log out. So I'm going to first of all create a user account for a user who is not existing. So let's say we're going to have our test user 123, and then we shall also have our email address for that test user. So I'm just going to provide test user 123 at, let's say, app.com, and then we shall also have our password. So let's go ahead and provide our password for the user. Then we also confirm that password. So I'm just going to come right here and confirm that password. So I'll go ahead and sign up, and now I'll try to log in with our user. So I'll say test user 123. Also go ahead and provide their password right here. So when I try to log in, we're now going to head over to the account of that specific user. Now when you go to our profile, what we shall now see is the default image that is created for each of the users who do not have a profile, which is actually good. So now let's go ahead and try to create our profile update page or view. So to update our user profiles, the first thing we're going to do is to first of all create tests that are going to allow us to be able to test whether those functionalities work. So to do that, what we're going to do is to first of all create within our tests package in our accounts app, we're going to create a module, and what we're going to call that is test user profile.py. And within test user profile.py, we're going to go ahead and define a set of methods or tests that are going to test the functionality of updating our user profile. So to do that, we're going to first of all import our test case class. So we're going to say from Django.test, we are going to import our test case. And once we have that, sorry for this, so this is going to be our test case class. And once we've done that, let's define our test class. So we're going to say class, and this will be our update profile, or let's call it the update profile tests, which is going to inherit from our test case class. So once we have this, let's go ahead and set it up. So we're going to define our setup method that's going to run each time this test runs. So this will take in self, as well as some of the other variables that we shall define there, or some other functionality that we shall define in our setup function. So let's go ahead and define our first test method. So I'm just going to come right here and say def test. So let's test if the profile page or the profile update page actually exists. So I'll say test profile update. Oh, this is actually going to be update page exists. So this is going to take in self. Now we're going to use Django's inbuilt test client to be able to perform a request to that URL and check whether it exists. Now that we haven't yet defined it, of course this test is going to fail, and then we shall resume by creating it. So what we're going to do is to first of all so we're going to create a response object, and this is going to be equal to self.client.get, and in this case we shall define our URL. So I'm going to go within our setup method, and then I'll say that self.url, or this is actually going to be equal to, so we shall use the reverse function for us to be able to get our specific URL for our profile update. I'm going to go at the top of our code and say from Django.urls, we are going to import our reverse. And once we've imported our reverse, I'll just come here and say that we're going to use reverse, and we shall basically access the URL that has the name of update user profile. So let's say update user profile. So once we've been able to do that, instead of providing the URL hard coded, all we have to do is to just come and say self.url. So once I've done that, then let's go ahead and assert some things to check whether the page actually exists. So the first thing we shall do is to assert if the status code that's going to be returned when you access this page is going to be 200. And now we're going to do that is by coming and saying assert equal. Now the first thing we shall check for is the status code. We shall compare the status code and that which will actually be returned. So we expect the response status code to be returned, and then we shall also expect to get a 200 status code in case this page exists. So we're going to import our class of HTTP. So I'll say from HTTP, we are going to import our HTTP status class, and using that we shall access the OK status code. So I'm just going to come and say HTTP status.OK. So once we have this, then we expect this to fail because we do not have that URL already provided. Now I'm also going to assert for the page that will be rendered by coming and saying self.assert, and in this case we shall assert for the template that's used, and shall have to provide a response as well as the name of the template that we're going to render. So in this case we shall say that we want to render account/update. So this will be update profile .html. So let me go ahead and fix this. So this will be update profile. I'll go ahead and save. So once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to run this test. So I'm going to minimize this a little bit and pull up our terminal. So get rid of this output right here, and then from here we're going to first of all run python manual.py, and then we shall call test, and then we're going to access our accounts app, access our test package, and then we shall access that specific file that we want to test. So in this case it's going to be our test user profile. So once we have that, then we're going to enter. So this is going to run our test, and it's going to tell us that the URL that's specific to the name that we provided here does not actually exist. So to fix that, we are going to go within our urls.py, within our accounts app, and we're going to define that specific URL. So I'm going to copy this name that we have here, and then I'll head over to our URLs. So that's within our urls.py. I'm going to create another URL configuration right here, which I'm going to say path, and this is going to be our update user profile URL. Then in there I'll have to attach this to a view which we haven't actually created yet. So I'm going to say views dot, we shall still call it update user profile, and then we shall also go ahead and have the name of this specific user profile. So in this case I'll just come and say that our name is going to be the same update user profile name that we had there. So if we try to run this, the URL actually exists, but it's not attached to a function, or a view function, and that's what we see here. Our test is failing and telling us that we do not have the update user profile view function. So for us to be able to implement this, we're going to head over to our views.py, still within our accounts app. So we're going to head over to our views.py, and within our views.py, we're going to create that specific view function. So I'm going to go down where we have our current user profile. So I'll just come right here below it, and I'll define our view function as update current user profile. So this takes in a request, and then it will return an HTTP response. So we shall return and then render. Then in here we shall have to provide our request object. Then the next thing is going to be our page that we wanted to render. So using our test user profile, we are actually going to access this. So instead of hard coding it here, we can actually copy this, cut it, and then paste it in here. And then I'm actually going to undo that and paste it in here. So after providing it there, now inside here, we can actually provide it here within our setup function. So instead of just hard coding it here, I'll just call self.template name. So I'm just going to come and say self.template name is going to be equal to our account/update profile.html. And once I have that, then in here, what I'm going to actually do is to come and say self.template name. which is good. So once we have that, then let's try to actually run our tests. So I'm going to pull up our terminal and then try to run our tests again. I will now see that it actually still does not pass. So let's try to see why this does not pass. So within our views.py, we have actually rendered our accounts update profile.html, but they're telling us that our page does not exist, so we need to create it. I'm going to go within our templates that we created in the previous videos, and that's within our root template folder. And then we're going to go to our accounts template right here. Then I'm going to first of all look at the name that I called. I called that our update profile. So create a new file and call it update profile.html. And once you have this, then let's go ahead and try to run our tests again. So I'll pull up our terminal, run our tests, and in this case we expect it to pass. And now we have been able to render our page. So if we go ahead and access our browser or access our web page, when you try to refresh and then access our URL for create a profile, we created this link right here in the previous videos. So when you try to click this, we expect to be redirected to an update page, but we do not have that. So we need to update this within our current user profile page. So to do that, I'm going to head over to our current user profile.html, and within here we're going to try to access the edit button. So we have this button here, which is basically a link that has the styles for a button, and we're going to provide the URL for updating our user profile. So I'll say URL, and then I'll provide that specific URL. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and provide that URL. So we gave it a name of update user profile. Now I'll just go ahead and basically paste that in here and save. So when you head over to our page and refresh, right now if you try to access that page, it's going to be a blank page. So what we want is this page to not be so different from our current user profile. So the way we're going to do that is by first of all copying this entire page for our current user profile and then pasting it within our update page. So I'm going to copy that, paste it there, and then save. So when you refresh, we have almost the same page as our current user profile. So what I'm going to get rid of is the content that actually lies in this right section. So to do that, I'll head back here, and what I have to do is to first of all locate where it is. So we have the first column being the one that has our card with our user profile image and the edit button. We also have the next column being the one that has all this information. So in here we have two Bootstrap cards, one for the user information and another one for rendering each of our posts for the current user. So to get rid of that, I'm first of all going to locate that specific div. So we're going to get rid of these two divs. Oh, actually we're going to first of all access the cards. So I'm going to first of all remove this card for the user information, and then I also look at the row for our posts. So I'm going to get rid of that. And once I save, when you head over back to our page and refresh, we're now going to have an empty section right here. So in this section, we are going to render forms that are going to allow us to update our user profile. And the way we're going to do that is by first of all creating our forms. So we've so far been successful at checking if our user profile image or our user profile page is rendered. But one thing we haven't done is to actually check if we have forms within that current user profile page. So we're going to create two forms. One is going to be for updating our user information, such as the username and the email address, and another one is going to be the one for updating our profile. So to assert whether those exist or check whether those exist, we're going to first of all write some other tests within our current tests that are going to help us to do that. So I'm going to come right here, and all I have to do is to first of all access both of the forms that we want within our context, which is provided by our response actually. So I'll just come right here, and first of all I'll check for the profile form, and this profile form is going to be equal to, so we're going to access that through our response context, and we shall call a .get because that's a dictionary. So we shall try to access our profile form, and then when it's not found, we shall get none. We shall do the same thing for our user form. So I'm just going to come and copy this and then paste it in here. And once I have this, then in here, I'm going to come and basically update this. So I'll do that with Ctrl and D. So I'll change this to user form. So once we have here, we have two variables that we need to access from our context. One is going to be our profile form and another one is going to be our user form. So when you have those, then what you're going to do is to actually check whether these are, whether our forms are actually going to be instances of our form classes. So to do that, I'm going to first of all come and say self.assert. And in this case, we shall assert whether these two are instances of their respective form classes. So the first thing in here we have to provide is going to be our object. So it's going to be our profile form. And then the next thing is going to be our instance or our class. So in this case, let's say we're going to create our form and we're going to call it our profile update form. So this doesn't actually exist for now, but we're going to create it. Another thing we're going to do is to also do the same thing. So we shall say assert is instance of, in this case, shall say our user form. And so this will actually be an instance of the user update form that you're also going to implement. So I'll come and say user update form. So once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to create this form. So when you run this test, of course, we expect them to fail. So let me actually close one of the bash terminals I have here. And then I'll go right in here, try to run this test again. And now we see that our forms are non-defined. So that means we have to create them. So what I'm going to do is to go within our forms.py, still within our accounts app. And the first thing I'm going to do is to create our profile update form as well as our user update form. So when first of all close that, so we already have our user registration form created here. I'm going to do first of all create our class. I'm going to call this our profile update form. So we're going to create this as a model form because we want it to be simply updating fields that exist on our database model. So I'll just come and say profile update form, and in this case I'll come and import our Django form. So we actually removed them, so I'll just come and say from Django import forms. So once we've done that, now in here I'm just going to come and say Django forms dot, in this case shall import our model form. And once we've done that, then we're going to just come here and define a meta class with the fields as well as the model. So I'm just going to come and say class meta, and in here I'll provide our model, and this is going to be our profile model, so I'll have to import it. Then I'll just come and say from dot models we are going to import our profile model. So we're going to import our profile, and then in here I'll just come and say profile. So then we shall have fields that we're going to update. So in this case, we now have our bio. When you go back to our profile, we have our bio and our address, but those fields are actually not updated. So when you go back here, what you're going to do is to first of all update those two. So shall provide our bio and then comma, then shall provide our address. So these are the only fields that you're going to update on our profile, since the image is actually generated from the email address that the user has. Now I'm going to also copy this, and I'm now going to go ahead and change this to our user update form. So I'm just going to come in here, and instead of having our profile update form, we shall have our user update form. So within our meta class, I'll go ahead and provide our model as our user model. And in here, we're going to actually have more fields to update. So to do that, we're going to come right here and say we're going to update our, so within the fields that the user has, when you go back to our profile actually, when you go to our user accounts on our admin, we have users that do not have specific fields. So I'll try to log in our admin user. And now when you go right here, we now see that the admin user has fields such as the first name, the last name, the email address, and some other specific fields. So what I'm going to do is to only add some specific fields such as the first name, and then we shall also get access to the last name, and then we shall also have access to the username. So we do not want to change the email address, we want to just keep it consistent. So what I'm going to do is to save. And now since we have this, then what we need to do in this case is to just go ahead and import them. So I'll go at the top of our code and then say from dot forms, or from accounts dot forms, we are going to go ahead and import our user update form as well as our profile update form. So I'm going to go ahead and save. So let's try to run our test. So when you run our test right now, we're actually going to see that none is not an instance of accounts profile update form. So it seems like we have an issue. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'm going to come right here and then check for our instance. So we have our instance, which is our profile form, and then we have our user profile form. And the reason that's why this is returning none is because we haven't yet passed these within our context. So to do that, we're going to go within our views, and then within our context, we're going to provide our instances of our forms. So I'm going to go at the top of our code, and I have to first of all import our profile update form as well as our user update form. So I'll say from dot forms, we are going to import our user update form as well as our profile update form. And once you've imported those, now let's go ahead and create instances of those that we are actually going to render within our context. So we're going to start by providing our profile form, and this is going to be equal to our profile update form. So this profile update form, since it's an update form, is going to have some data of the user who want to update. So Django already stores an object of the currently logged in user through the request.user object. So once we have our request right here, we can access the user who is logged in via request.user. So the way we're going to do that is by first of all create the instance or the object for our user update form by saying user form, and this is going to be our user update form. So once we have that, then let's go ahead and try to provide our instance. So the instance or the user we're actually going to update is going to be request.user, and that will be the user we want to update. Now if we want to also update the profile, we're going to update the profile for the user who is logged in. So we're going to say instance, and this is going to be equal to request.user.profile. So once we have this, I'm going to go ahead and save. So when we save, we're going to try to run our tests. We actually need to include these in our context. So I'm going to create a context dictionary right here. And then within our context dictionary, we're going to have the keys that we specified in our test. So the first one is going to be our profile form, and that will have our value of our profile form. And then in here, we shall also have our user form. And then this will have a value of our user form. So let's go ahead and put that within our render function. So after providing our template name, now we shall also provide our context. And now we hope that our test is actually going to run. So we pull up our terminal and then run our test again. This time we see that our anonymous user object has no attribute meta. And the reason that's why this is happening is because we do not have anyone having to log in first before they access this route. So if you're to notice, our other view functions have the login required decorator, meaning we have to log in for us to be able to carry out the specific request. But this specific view function does not have it. So let's go ahead and protect this so that we only have to access it when logged in. So I'm going to go at the top of our do function right here, and I'll just decorate it with login required. So when we save and try to make this request again, we see that it's now failing because we are getting our 302 status code. So this means we have to first of all log in for us to be able to access this specific route. So when you go to our test user profile, we're first of all going to modify our setup function. So just going to come right here. So this setup function is going to run every time we expect this test to run, but it needs to create a user who is going to log in to access this specific page. So we're going to do that by using our user class. I'm actually going to first of all import our get user models, just like I've been doing. So I'll say from Django dot contrib dot auth, we are going to import our get user model. And once you have that, then let's go ahead and create our user class. So our user class is going to be the result of calling get user model. So I'll say user is going to be equal to get user model. And once you have that, then I'll go ahead and say that we're going to create our user. So shall say user dot objects dot create, and then we shall access the create user method. So I'll go ahead and copy some of the data that we had in the previous videos. So what I'll do is to go within our test for the current user profile, and I'll copy some of the information that we created in the previous video. Now if you don't know how I created this, please go ahead and check out the previous videos. So I'm going to copy this and then head over back to our tests. So I'm going to close this, and then what I'll do is to go ahead and test this entire process of creating our user. So once we've created this user, now we expect to log in into our account before actually going ahead to run this test. So we are going to do that by using our test client. So we're going to say self.client.login, and in this case we shall provide credentials. So the first one is going to be our username, and that is going to be self.username, and the second one is going to be our password. So shall say password, and our password is going to be self.password. So when you save, this case we expect this test to pass because it's now associated with a user. So what I'm going to do is to first of all go ahead and pull up this terminal, try to test again, and now we see that our test is actually running. So this is actually amazing. So the next thing we're going to do is to now test if our forms actually create our user, or if our forms actually update our user profiles as well as information of our specific user. So just like you can see here, what we've done is to just go ahead and what we've done within our views is to just go ahead and create these instances of our forms, but we haven't yet rendered them within our template. So let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to first of all go ahead and go to our update profile. So where we actually created where we removed our section, I'm just going to update this section by adding some components. So I'll just go ahead and first of all create an h1 and then provide some data in here. So this is going to be update user information. So I'm just going to come and say update user information, and once I've done that, then I'm going to create a form. This form is going to be a post form, a form that's going to actually carry out a post request. Then I'm going to provide a CRF token for security purposes, and now I'm going to render both of the forms. So in this case, we're going to first of all render our profile. Let's actually first render our user form, and then we're also going to render our profile form. So just going to come and say profile underscore form. And once you have this, then let's go ahead and also provide our input that's going to submit this updated data. So I'll say input, and this will be our input of submit. And I'm going to give it some Bootstrap classes. So I'll say btn and then btn submit. So this is actually how you do it using the emmet extension. So once I have this, then I'll provide the value as save. And when you save, when you go back to our web page, so we're going to go back here on our web page and access our page. So when you go to our edit profile, shall now access our page, but in this case it's going to have our fields, so which is good. So let's go ahead and try to provide Django crispy forms so that we can have these forms fields actually organized in a good way. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to first of all load our crispy forms tag. So I'll come right here and then I'll say load, and in this case we shall load our crispy forms tags. Now if you haven't watched the video where we set this up, please go ahead and check it out. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and when you head over right here, we don't have anything changing, so we have to use our crispy filter to actually render this form fields in an organized way. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and add the crispy filter onto each of our forms. So I'll say form and then crispy, and then I'll do the same thing for our profile form. So just add the crispy filter just like you see right here, then save. So when you head over to our page right here and try to refresh, we now see that our fields are going to be organized somehow. Another thing we can do is to provide classes or Bootstrap classes that are going to make this more beautiful. So the way you're going to do that is by going back to our forms where we defined our forms. That's within our forms.py, still within our accounts app. So I'm going to close some of this and head over back to our forms. And when you have our forms, inside here, what we can do is to provide widgets for each of the fields that we have in our forms. Now let's go ahead and do that. So I'll come and say widgets. It's actually going to be widgets. And in here, we're going to have a dictionary. So this dictionary is going to have widgets for each of the fields, but you need to define them by using a key. So let's say we are going to access our bio. So our bio is going to be a text field. So what we're going to do is to actually access our Django forms, and then shall give it a widget of our text area. And in here, we are going to define our attributes. So shall say attributes, and then in here we shall provide the key, which is going to be our attribute for the class, and we shall also provide our value as form control, which is going to be our specific Bootstrap class. So when I save and refresh this side, we shall now see that our bio field has changed to a nicely organized Bootstrap styled form. So let's go ahead and do it for the rest. So I'm going to do the same thing for our address. So I'll just copy this and then paste it right in here. And instead of having our bio as the key, we shall have our address. And then instead of having the widget as text area, we shall have the widget as text input. And then the class is going to remain form control. So I'll save and then refresh. We're now going to see that our address field has changed as well. So let's try to do the same thing for the rest of the fields of our first name, last name, and our username. So I'm going to head over back here, and what I'll do is to go ahead and basically do the same thing. So I'll just copy this widgets attribute right here and then paste it right here. So once we have it, now I'm going to first of all provide, so we don't have a text area, all we have is the username, the first name, and the last name. Now I'm just going to go ahead and paste this for the times we have it. So that will be for the username, and this will be for, actually it's going to be for our username, and then we shall have this for our first name, and we shall have this for our last name. So we're going to still keep our widget as the text input, so we shall not change that. All we have to change are the various fields. So this is going to be our username. We shall also have our first name, and then we shall also have our last name. So when I save and then we try to go back to our web page, when we refresh, we're now going to see that our fields are all styled in a very good way, which is nice. So now we can also go ahead and first finish styling this button. So I'm going to head over to our update profile. So it seems like we have class btn submit, which is supposed to actually be btn primary. Sorry for that. So just going to provide btn primary and then try to refresh here. Now this is going to actually add our, this will add our button right here. So let me add some line breaks to just make it a little bit separated from the top, and that's what we have. So we have successfully rendered our fields for updating our user. But what we want is for us to be able to carry out a post request and then be able to update the current user's information. So we're going to be able to do that by using our model forms, and we're going to do that in isolation. What I mean is we want to test only the forms without having to actually test the post request that's made with these posts. So for us to be able to the post request that's made for this specific form fields, that's what I actually mean. So to do that, what I'm going to do is to go ahead and create a test that's going to allow us to check if these specific fields actually go ahead and update our users information. So I'm going to go right within our tests. So we actually call that test user profile.py, and what I'll do is to go ahead here and say def test. So in this case I'll say profile and user update forms update users. So I'm going to add in self, and then what I'll do here is to go ahead and first of all access this page. So just like you see here, we have our client login. So I'll copy that specific line and also add it here. So after the client logging in, we can access this page. So let's go ahead and try to use our forms to save our data. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and create our form instances having the same data of the post request that shall be made. Now, instead of using our clients to create this post request, what we're going to do is to create an HTTP request object that we shall provide data for, and then use that data to save our forms, just like we're going to see. So I'll go at the top of our code, and then what I'll do is to first of all import the HTTP status class from which we shall create our request object. So I'm just going to come and say from HTTP, it's actually HTTP request. So I'll say from, it's actually going to be from Django.http, we shall import our HTTP request. And once we have this, then let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just come right in here. We actually don't need our class because we don't need our client. What I've realized, we don't need our client for this test. So I'll just come and remove it, since we're just going to be testing this with just our forms and a dummy request object. So we shall first of all begin by creating this request object. So we shall say request is going to be equal to our HTTP request. And now we're going to associate this to a user. So after us logging in, we actually need to have a user, but what we can do is to actually associate that user to associate this request to the user with the information that we have right here. So to do that, I'm going to come right here, and all I have to first of all do is to associate this with the user by saying request.user, and I'll say that this is going to be equal to user.objects.get, and that's going to be our first user, or the user we've created in our setup method. And right after doing that, then the next thing we're going to do is to also associate this request with some post data. So the post data we're going to actually have is going to be a combination of both the profile data as well as our user data. So I'm going to come and do that with request.post, and in this case we shall now go ahead and create this as a dictionary, and this is going to have information such as our bio. So we shall have our bio, and then our bio in this case is going to actually be some sample text. So let's just say sample bio text, and then we shall also have our address, and this is going to be, so in here we're going to have some bio address, and this shall be some address data. So let's say 123 Django Avenue or something like that. So once we have that, then we shall also go ahead and provide, let's say, a first name of the user I want to update. Let's say updated username, or let's just say updated, and then let's say that the last name is going to be our, so let's just say updated user. So once we have this, then the next thing we're actually going to do is to go ahead and try. We're actually missing a username, so let's provide one. So when you say that our username is going to be equal to our test user, now we can have the specific user or this specific post request data. And now since we have this request post data, now we're going to associate it with our forms. So to do that, we're now going to just come in here, and all we have to do is to get this post data associated with our forms given the instance of our user and the user's profile. So we're going to come right here, and all you have to do is to first of all create our profile form. So I'll just come and say that our profile form is going to be equal to our profile update form. And then first of all, we need an instance of the profile form, of the profile data, or the profile instance we want to update. So that's going to be via the instance attribute. And then since we have the current user via request.user right here, we can access their profile by saying request.user.profile. So once we have that, then let's go ahead and also provide our user form. So just going to come and say user form, and then this is going to be our user update form. It's going to take in the instance of our user, so we shall say request.user. And once you have that, then we shall also provide our data. So since we have these two forms, you need to provide the instance as well as the data. So the instance is that specific object we want to update, and then the data is going to be the data we want to use to update that instance. So to do that, I'm going to come right here and say instance. So this will be our data. So our data in this case is going to be request. Actually, it's going to be a dictionary, and this dictionary is going to contain data specific to our profile. So that's going to be our bio, and our bio will be request.post. And in this case, we shall get our bio information just like we provided it here. So shall get the bio, or if it doesn't exist, then we shall have none. So shall provide none. So once we have that, then you also need to provide the address, and this will be request.post and then .get. Then we shall have to get the address, and if it does not exist, then we shall have to say none. So let's do the same thing for our user. So in here, we're going to go ahead and provide the user data. So I'll just simply copy what we have here, and then I'll paste it in here. So what we're going to have are the various fields for our user. So instead of having the bio, we are going to go ahead and have our first name. So let's say we shall have our first name, and then in here we shall also have our last name. So I'm just going to come here and say that we shall have our last name. So once you have that, then let's go ahead and also try to provide our username. So I'll copy one of these fields we have here and then paste it right here. So shall have our username. Let me just copy this and change it to our username. So when I save, what's going to happen is these forms are now going to have some data within them. So the first thing we're going to assert for is whether these are actually valid, because when we are trying to submit these forms, we check whether they are valid and whether they have the post request data. So now that they have the post request data, we have to first of all assert whether they are valid. So we're just going to come and say self.assert true. So shall check if they shall say assert and then true, and then in this case we shall just say profile form dot is valid. And when this is true, the test will pass. In case it's false, the test will fail. So we're going to do the same thing for our user form. So we shall come and say self.assert true, and then in this case we shall come and say that we're going to have our user form dot is valid. So once we have this, let's try to run this test. So we're going to pull up our terminal and then run our test. So now we see that we have two tests that are actually all working, which means that our profile update and our user update forms all accept post request data and then are valid based on that specific data. So now let's check and see what will actually happen when these forms are saved. So to do that, I'm going to come right here, and all I have to do is to come and say profile form dot save, and then I'll do the same thing for our user form dot save. So once I have that, let's go ahead and try to assert. So I'll just come and say self dot assert, and in this case, what I'm going to assert for is going to be whether the profile information is the same as the data that we've actually sent via the post request. So in this case, I'll say assert equal, and what I'll do is to first of all provide the first item. So in this case, let's first of all assert whether our request dot user dot username is going to be the same as our request data. So we're going to say request dot post, and then we access our username. Now also do that for the profile. We're going to say self dot assert equal, and in this case shall say request dot user dot profile dot, in this case, let's say want to access the bio. We are now going to also access it as provided within our post request. So we're going to say request dot post, and then we shall access our username. Actually, this was supposed to be dot get username, so we're going to just come and say dot get username and none. So we shall also have to do the same thing here. So we shall say dot get, and then here we shall get our bio, and if it doesn't exist, then we shall have to get none. So let's try to run this. So when we try to run our test, we now see we've made a mistake. Let me fix that. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and when I try to run this test again, we now see that our tests are running, which means that once these forms are valid, they can be able to submit data and update both our user information as well as the user's profile. Now let's go ahead and implement that. So to do that, we're going to go within our views, and then what we have are two forms: our user update form with the instance of the data we want to update, and our profile form with the instance of the data that we want to update. So the first thing is always to create a post request. So to do that, we're going to say if request dot method is going to be equal to our post. So in this case, what we're going to do is to go ahead and create the same forms, but in this case they'll have the data that comes as a result of the post request. Now that is what we're actually doing right here. So I'm just going to get what we have here, and that is exactly what we're going to have within our view here. So it will just have data that comes from our post request as data that we've separated. So the data comes as one dictionary, then from that dictionary we can be able to access individual fields such as the bio, the address for the profile, as well as the first name, last name, and username for the user form. So if these are valid, so we're going to check if both of them are valid. We shall go ahead and save, and if they are not valid, then we shall have to redirect to the same page. So I'll just come and write an if, and then I'll check if our profile form dot is valid, and then I'll also provide an and then say user form dot is valid. Then in this case we shall basically call both of the forms to save. So I'll say profile form dot save, and then I'll do the same thing for our user form. So I'll say user form dot save, and what we actually want to do here is to check if both of them are valid, so that we only save one form when both forms are actually valid. So after saving, we want to return, and then we want to redirect to So in this case, I'll have to provide reverse, and then I'll go ahead and provide the URL for our current user profile. So we go to our URLs, we actually have that as current user profile. I'll go ahead and copy it, and then I'll paste it in here. So go ahead and save. And now what you're going to have is, if these forms are valid, what will happen is the forms will save. If they are not valid, we shall redirect to the same page with the same instance data that we had. So I'm going to pull up our terminal, try to run our tests again. Now our test will pass. So let's go ahead and try to actually test this on our browser. So when you go right here and try to refresh, so let's try to provide some bio data. So in here, we're going to say bio for, let's say, a software engineer. Working on this site. And then we shall also maybe change our admin to our admin user. So we have last name admin. So let me change this to my name. So say Sally, and then we have our last names as Jonathan. So we're now going to go in our address just here, and then we can have our address being a real address. So I updated these values from the admin. So in here we shall have, let's say, 123 and then Quad Avenue, just like we had provided. So when you try to save, we now see that we're going to redirect to our page, and our information has been updated, which is wonderful. So let us try to also modify it so that we have the full information as it comes from our database. So we have fields such as the, when we go to our profile, we have fields such as our, so we see our test user 123, and then we have fields such as the bio, the address, the profile image. So we also have first name and last name. So I'm going to also provide those. Now I'm going to go back to our edit profile and remove this page or this button. So I'll go to update profile, and then I'll get rid of this button right here for basically updating the user profile. Since you're on that page, we don't need it. Now I'm going to go also ahead and go back to our current user profile page, and then add some information that we actually don't have, such as the first name and the last name. I'm going to copy this and then actually copy it with its line break, and then I'll paste it right here. So when I save and try to refresh, it's actually logged. So I've enlarged this a little bit, sorry for that. So I'm going to go back to our profile, and now we have username, and username. So I'm going to change that. So first of all, we're going to have our first name. So I'm going to update this to first name. And then I'm going to go ahead and also provide this as user.first name. And then I'll do the same thing here. So I'll say last name. And then this is going to be user.last name. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And when you go back here and refresh, we're now going to have both our first name, our last name, and then our username, our email address, and then our address. So this means that we've successfully been able to update our user profiles. If you made it to the end of this video, I'd like to say thank you for watching, and please leave a like on this video, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.